Welcome, history nerds, historical TV drama addicts, and anyone who just wandered in here because they saw the words Conqueror of Jerusalem. Today, we're strapping on our chainmail of skepticism and riding headfirst into the epic battlefield that is Saladin Eyyubi Conqueror of Jerusalem, episodes 1 through 7. This is a Q&A episode, meaning you've brought the questions, I've brought the sass, and together we're going to separate fact from fiction faster than a crusader running from a cavalry charge. We'll talk about what the show gets right, where it takes wild creative liberties, and which parts are pure, historically flavored soap opera. For those who haven't binged this epic TV drama yet, it is the sweeping historical drama that takes us from the dusty streets of Damascus to the holy chaos of the Third Crusades, and enough slow-motion horseback riding to make you wonder if the cameraman has a personal vendetta against time itself. It's part history lesson, part political soap opera, and part look how shiny our armor budget was. We'll follow young Saladin as he navigates palace intrigue, medieval power plays, and enough side-eye glances to power an entire season of Real Housewives of Cairo. The show wants to teach you about chivalry, honor, and strategy, but also, let's be real, it wants you to swoon over dramatic speeches and smoldering hero stares. So buckle up, we're talking love triangles, crusader drama, and enough dramatic music swells to make Hans Zimmer proud. So picture this, the Second Crusade has just wrapped up, and it was basically the medieval equivalent of a bad group project. The Crusaders came in all hyped, made a big mess, and went home without actually fixing anything. The Muslim world, meanwhile, is looking around like, okay, who's actually in charge here? The Seljuk Empire, once the big bad wolf of the Islamic world, is now a soap opera of squabbling cousins and half-brothers. They've gone from, we control half of Asia, to, we control our neighborhood. Maybe. Instead of one unstoppable superpower, you've got a bunch of smaller sultanates, too busy stabbing each other in the back, sometimes literally, to remember the Crusaders were still outside. Enter Nur al-Din Zingi, the guy who looked at all this chaos and said, absolutely not. His dad, Imad al-Din, had already pulled off the legendary capture of Edessa, aka Urfa, in 1144, which is what made the Crusaders freak out and launch the Second Crusade in the first place. Nur al-Din inherits the family war machine, keeps the holy war banner flying high, and actually tries to unify Muslims under one cause, pious, strategic, and terrifying when he needs to be. He's the man who lays the groundwork for Salah al-Din's rise. Meanwhile, over in Baghdad, the Abbasid Caliphate is basically running the world's fanciest retirement home. I mean, they are about as threatening as your grandpa's bridge club. However, they are still the big religious deal politically. The caliphs still hand out fatwas and religious blessings like Oprah giving away cars. You get legitimacy. And you get legitimacy. You all get legitimacy. But the actual military muscle is long gone. Down in Cairo, the Fatimid Caliphate is, well, circling the drain. There is Ismaili Shia, making them theological rivals of the Sunni Abbasids, and they've spent the last few decades in a spiral of palace intrigue. Think of a dynasty trying to run an empire while the palace is on fire, the viziers are stealing the silverware, and the neighbors are eyeing the property. Everyone knows Egypt is rich and strategically vital, which means it is only a matter of time before someone, Nur al-Din and Salah al-Din, swoops in to take it. When the Salah al-Din Eyyubi series opens, West Asia is basically a chessboard with half the pieces missing. The Crusaders are still hanging around like bad house guests who don't take the hint, and young Salah al-Din is about to be pointed toward destiny and shoved into the maelstrom with a good luck kid, just like it's another Tuesday. So what the heck are we watching here? The Second Crusade, between 1147 and 1149 was basically a medieval flop for the Europeans. The Crusaders set out to reinforce Christian holdings in the Holy Land, especially after, as mentioned, Muslims captured Edessa. But thanks to poor coordination, infighting, and some truly terrible battlefield decisions, they achieved, well, let's just say not much. The Crusader states were still in place though. Jerusalem, Antioch, Tripoli. However, they were badly shaken, while Muslim leaders in the region sensed an opportunity to finally push back. The Seljuk Empire had once been the Islamic powerhouse, stretching from Anatolia to Persia. By the mid-1100s though, they were more like a giant clay pot that had been dropped. Still recognizable, but in many pieces. Internal family feuds, constant succession disputes, and decentralization chipped away at unity. The empire fractured into semi-independent sultanates. For example, like the Sultanate of Rum in Anatolia and the Seljuks of Iraq in Kerman. Instead of one unified force pushing back against the Crusaders, you had multiple mini-states, often too busy bickering with each other to mount a coordinated response. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? While the Seljuks were busy imploding, Nur al-Din Zengi was quietly building a serious Muslim resistance movement. As I already mentioned, his father had already taken Edessa from the Crusaders in 1144, and this was the spark that set off the Second Crusade. Nur al-Din inherited Aleppo and parts of northern Syria after his father's assassination in 1146. Unlike many Muslim rulers at the time, Nur al-Din understood the need for unity. He framed his fight as a religious struggle, a jihad, against the Crusaders, and also worked to bring fractured Muslim states under one banner, sometimes with diplomacy, sometimes at sword point. He's the mentor figure in Salah al-Din's real-life story, the man who set the stage for his later victories. The Abbasids were caliphs in name, not in power. Based in Baghdad, by this period, the Abbasid Caliphate was basically a ceremonial institution. The caliphs still had immense religious authority, but political power was in the hands of whoever held the actual military strength in the region. In this case, various sultans and emirs. The caliph could endorse leaders like Nur al-Din or later Salah al-Din, lending religious legitimacy to their campaigns against the Crusaders, but they couldn't field armies of their own to influence events directly. Meanwhile, the Fatimids were a dynasty on borrowed time. Based in Cairo, Egypt, and from the Ismaili sect of Islam, they were the serious rivals to the Sunni Abbasids. By the mid-1100s, the Fatimid Caliphate was in deep decline. Court intrigue, weak caliphs, and power-hungry viziers had eroded real control. This mattered because Egypt was a strategic goldmine. Whoever controlled it could dominate trade routes, supply armies, and pressure the Crusader states from the south. This made it a prime target for both Nur al-Din and Salah al-Din later. In fact, Salah al-Din's rise to ultimate power began in Fatimid Egypt, where he dismantled the Shia state and brought it under Sunni rule. So basically, by the time the Salah al-Din Eyyubi series opens, the political map was basically Seljuks, fragmented and fading, Zengids, the rising power in Syria, championing the anti-Crusader cause, the Abbasids, religious figureheads, politically sidelined but symbolically important, the Fatimids, Shia rulers of Egypt, militarily weakened, ripe for takeover, all while Crusaders are in the midst, provoking and trying to keep them all divided. Now let's dive into all these great questions. Question 1. Was Salah al-Din the adopted son of Nur al-Din? Short answer, no. Longer answer, absolutely not, and here's why. First off, Muslims don't do adoption in the Western, change your last name and call me dad sense. That's not a cultural or religious practice. What is encouraged, and in fact praised in the Quran, is fostering, caring for orphans, feeding them, protecting them, making sure they're not left out in the cold, literally literally or figuratively. But legally, turning them into your heir, different story. Why? In Islam, and in most tribal societies, lineage is everything. Your bloodline determines inheritance, kinship ties, and who you can and can't marry. You can't just swap out a surname like a Netflix password. A foster child remains a full member of their own family and tribe with their own rights and obligations. They don't automatically inherit from their foster family because legally their inheritance belongs to their biological line. Also, you can't just disown a blood relative because you feel like it, unless they've truly crossed the "you are dead to us" threshold by harming or betraying the tribe in like some severe way. So when the TV series has Nur al-Din declaring Salah al-Din his actual son, yeah, that's not just historically inaccurate, it would have been a massive cultural taboo and flat out illegal under Sharia law at the time. But hey, it makes for juicy TV drama, so here we are. In reality, Salah al-Din's biological father, Najm al-Din, whose name is Nusmetin in the TV series, and his uncle, Asad al-Din, whose name is Shirkuh in the TV series, were already high-ranking generals and close companions of Nur al-Din, the Sultan of Damascus. Salah al-Din grew up in that military environment, surrounded by warriors, commanders, and battlefield strategy, basically groomed from day one to be a Ghazi, warrior of the faith. That's how he and Nur al-Din formed a bond, not through a made-for-TV adoption subplot, but by fighting, training, and serving together in the same cause. Question 2. When did this production begin? It's wild that it aired right before October 7th. The series officially hit screens in November 2023, but let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't written, cast, filmed, edited, and polished in 3 weeks. The script was locked down ages ago, and cameras were rolling long before October. The whole thing was probably sitting in the editing room while world events started to look suspiciously like season spoilers. So yeah, the timing is interesting. Strong coincidence? Absolutely, but also history has this annoying habit of recycling its material. That's why the themes in Saladin Eyyubi feel eerily relevant to what's going on in Gaza and Syria right now. It's not prophecy, folks, just the same old political drama with different actors and slightly upgraded armor. Fun fact, this isn't just a Turkish production. Nope, it's a Turkish-Pakistani collaboration. Pakistan has been all about Turkish historical dramas ever since Resurrection Ertugrul dropped in 2017 and blew up their TV ratings. Apparently, they got tired of the endless evil mother-in-law versus saintly daughter-in-law storylines and wanted a little more swordplay and siege warfare in primetime. So here we are, a cross-continental passion project. Season 1's cast is entirely Turkish, but rumor has it that Season 2 will bring in Pakistani actors. Personally, I can't wait to see how the cultural blend plays out. Hopefully with fewer palace poisoning plots and more epic battlefield banter. Question 3. Are the Crusaders during this time period French? Not exactly, or at least not in the bonjour croissant Eiffel Tower way you're imagining. I know I probably said croissant wrong. I say it like American, damn it. They were Franks and Germanic people originally from what's now Western Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Over time, their empire stretched into what the Romans once called Gaul, modern-day France, and they eventually mixed with the local culture and language. Yes, the Franks are part of the ancestry of modern French people, but calling a 12th century Frank French is like calling a Viking Swedish just because IKEA exists now. The show, like many historical dramas, takes some liberties here. The Crusaders in Saladin Eyyubi throw around modern French phrases, which sounds dramatic, but is about as accurate as having Julius Caesar speak in Shakespearean English. In reality, the Franks spoke Old Franconian, a Germanic language that's been dead for centuries. Modern productions just use French because it's easier for audiences, and honestly, Old Franconian would probably sound like someone choking on a pretzel to most modern ears. And yes, the Franks were Germanic, so the casting department clearly leaned into that when picking actors. Some of those Frankish knights in the series do look like they stepped out of a medieval beer hall. Take Gregor, for example. The man's jawline could probably cut through chainmail. Fun fact. The actor is actually Kurdish. It doesn't really matter for most of the Templars and Crusaders if they look white enough, to be honest, since 90% of the time they are wearing a bucket-shaped helmet anyway. Hey, that's historical costuming done right. Armor that hides your face. Question, comment number 4. Princess Victoria's French is awful. Oh, absolutely. Victoria's French was so bad, I half expected the subtitles to apologize. And then came the Latin line, which was delivered with all the grace of someone reading IKEA instructions in the dark. It was awkward. It was hilarious. And somewhere, both Joan of Arc and Julius Caesar just collectively facepalmed. Question 5. Was the Zingid dynasty Arab or Kurdish? Neither. The Zingids were Oghuz Turks, a branch of the big, sprawling Turkic family tree. Think less Kurdish or Arab and more descendants of the steppe warriors who made the medieval world panic every time they saddled a horse. They originally served as vassals under the Seljuk Turks, but by the time the Saladin Eyyubi series takes place, Seljuk power was sliding downhill faster than a knight in full armor on an ice patch. Other Turkic dynasties were on the rise, and Zingids were among the most prominent. They still kept friendly ties with the Seljuk leaders, but politically they'd broken out on their own. In the show, Nur al-Din is married to Maliki Hatun, a Seljuk princess, and yes, marriages like this were basically the medieval equivalent of a LinkedIn endorsement, but with better jewelry. Such unions brought legitimacy, political clout, and alliances that made it harder for rivals to plot your downfall, at least in theory. So let's talk wives. As a Muslim sultan, Nur al-Din could have had between 1 and 4 wives at any given time, plus a harem of concubines. Marriages in this world were rarely just about romance. They were about sealing political deals and keeping powerful families loyal. In fact, some of these marriages might never have been consummated, which was fine, because the point wasn't candlelit dinners, it was chessboard politics. Historically, Nur al-Din is said to have married Ismet Hatun. The series opens with a woman who dies in childbirth, likely meant to be one of Nur al-Din's concubines. Why? Because of the telling line later. Maliki Hatun smugly tells her handmaid that if she gives the Sultan a son, he'll have no need for Salah al-Din as an heir. The kicker? She doesn't know Salah al-Din isn't Nur al-Din's biological son. What makes her logic laughable is that under Islamic and Turkic law, the son of a concubine was just as legitimate as the son of a wife. Inheritance and succession didn't discriminate between born from nikah and born from the harem. And here's where her fantasy gets truly ridiculous. Even if she did have a son, the kid would be 20 years younger than Salah al-Din. And in Turkic tradition, primogeniture, where the eldest son inherits, was not the rule. The sultan could choose any legitimate heir to succeed him, ideally the strongest and most capable, because eldest doesn't always mean wisest, bravest, or least likely to set the palace on fire. The whole point was to avoid instability, civil war, and the occasional disastrous reign of someone who got the job just by being born first. The fact that Salah al-Din is a powerful warrior who is respected by all men of state and who survived the dangers of medieval childhood makes him a likely choice anyways. Question 6. Was the Fatimid dynasty Persian? The Fatimids were Arab, specifically an Arab Shia dynasty, and about as Persian as a camel in a snowstorm. There are some camels that live in the snow, by the way, especially in Central and East Asia. So that joke is kind of useless, I guess. I'm guessing this question comes from the common misconception that Shia equates to Persian, because modern Iran is Shia. But history is rarely that simple, and in the 12th century, the Fatimids were ruling Egypt, not Persia. The Fatimids claimed direct descent from Fatima, the Prophet Muhammad's daughter, which was a pretty big claim to religious legitimacy. The Sunni Abbasids, on the other hand, claimed descent from Muhammad's uncle Abbas. These two dynasties spent a good chunk of history glaring at each other across the political chessboard, each insisting they were the rightful leader of the Muslim world, the Caliphate. By the time our TV series takes place, Fatimid power was circling the drain. Their once mighty influence was getting steamrolled by Sunni Turkic powers like the Zingids, and even before them the Seljuks, who normally recognized the Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad. So the Fatimids, despite their grand genealogical claims, were stuck in a messy decline. Question 7. Are Emir Mansur and Suraya and her family real historical people? Emir Mansur? Yes, mostly. He was the Emir of Ashkelon, a prime coastal city that was basically the medieval equivalent of owning a toll booth on the busiest trade highway in the region. Ashkelon wasn't just important, it was strategically priceless because it sat right on the trade route and particularly within shouting distance of Jerusalem. Think of it as the gateway to Jerusalem. Now, Emir Mansur was tied to the Seljuk political orbit, though calling him part of the Seljuk dynasty itself might be a stretch, since Ashkelon was technically under the Fatimids for much of this era and often governed by appointed emirs. He was also most likely Arab and not Turk. Either way, he was definitely a key Muslim leader in the back and forth slugfest with the Crusaders. And back and forth is putting it mildly. Ashkelon changed hands so many times during the Crusades, it could have installed a revolving door. The Crusaders taking Ashkelon, as shown in the series? Yep, that's straight from the history books. Suraya, however, the beautiful, sword-swinging Ghazi princess who steals young Saladin's heart, is pure historical fiction. No record of her exists, and trust me, if there had been a politically connected warrior princess galloping into battle in the 12th century, the chroniclers would have been all over it. That said, her character isn't totally implausible. Muslim women, including Turkic and Arab noblewomen, did sometimes participate in military defense during this period. The Prophet Muhammad himself fought alongside 2 female Ghazis during his lifetime. So while Suraya herself is fictional, she's loosely inspired by real-life female warriors of the Islamic world. So to sum it up, Emir Mansur, real, though maybe not exactly as the show paints him. Suraya, not real, but she makes for great TV. The Crusaders taking Ashkelon, 100% happen. Question 8. Can you explain the titles Malik, Emir, Bey, and Beyler Bey? Alright, let's break down the medieval Muslim LinkedIn profile. These titles sound similar, sometimes overlap in meaning, and are guaranteed to make your average Netflix watching history newbie glaze over, but they actually tell you a lot about power, politics, and rank in the Islamic world. Malik in Turkish, or Malik in Arabic, literally means king or ruler. It's the kind of title you use if you want to walk into a room and have everyone bow or at least look impressed. In practice, it can mean a full-fledged monarch, or in some cases, a high-ranking prince ruling a region under a greater sultan. Emir, or Amir, is fun because it's a title with range. It means commander or prince, and it could be used for anything from a provincial governor to a high-ranking military officer. An emir might be running a city, leading an army, or both. Essentially, a regional manager of the medieval Islamic world, but with actual power and a much better wardrobe. Bey, among Turkic people, means chieftain, lord, or nobleman. Think of it as the leader of the local principality, a tribal chief, or a land-holding noble. This title could be hereditary, passed from father to son, or earned through military service, loyalty, and the occasional well-timed coup. Beyler Bey means literally Bey of Beys or Lord of Lords. This is your top-tier Commander of Commanders title. The medieval Muslim equivalent to a Commander-in-Chief meets Provincial Governor. The Beyler Bey oversaw multiple territories, ruled over lesser beys, commanded large armies, and answered only to the Sultan, and sometimes not even to him if he was feeling ambitious. Think of it as an ultimate power up in the title hierarchy. You go from managing a castle to managing an entire region of castles. Question 9. Why is it such a big deal who Salah al-Din's milk mother is? Glad you asked, because in Islamic culture, a milk mother isn't just some nice lady who fed the baby. She holds a sacred place in kinship law, and the role comes with lifelong social, legal, and even political consequences. This isn't your Downton Abbey wet nurse situation. This is a bond that can literally rewrite your family tree. In the medieval Islamic world, and still today in some places, milk mothers were vital. If a baby's biological mother died in childbirth, was ill, or couldn't produce milk, another woman would nurse the child. And in noble or royal families, sending an infant to be raised and nursed by a trusted family or tribe wasn't just about survival. It was about forging alliances, toughening up the kid, and absorbing the tribe's culture and values. Case in point, the Prophet Muhammad was fostered by a Bedouin family because it was believed Bedouin-raised children grew up hardier, healthier, and with better morals, and presumably way better desert survival skills. Here's the key part. Under Islamic law, once a woman nurses a child, that child becomes her child in kinship terms. Her biological children become the child's milk siblings, which means no one in that group can marry each other, ever. It's considered incest, because milk kinship is treated with the same seriousness as blood kinship. Your milk siblings are mahram, permanent non-marriageable relatives. So why is it such a big deal in the series? Because Nur al-Din not disclosing who Salah al-Din's milk mother is would be seen as a major red flag. We're talking, what is he hiding and why? This isn't the kind of detail you just forget to mention, especially in a world where marriage alliances are political weapons and inheritance laws can be life or death matters. Question 10. Is Sultan Nur al-Din blocking his brother's inheritance rights? Oh, absolutely. In this show, by passing Salah al-Din off as his son, Nur al-Din is essentially playing medieval Monopoly, but stealing property cards from his brother when no one's looking. Remember the first episode? At that point, Nur al-Din isn't even Sultan yet. He's a Malik, prince. The only thing standing between him and being picked as his father's heir is the fact that he doesn't have a son. In a dynastic world, no heir equals political liability. The childless ruler is basically dangling a "please rebel against me" sign over the palace gates. Even if his father adores him, the lack of a clear line of succession makes everyone nervous and gives ambitious relatives all kinds of bad ideas. Nur al-Din knows this. He also knows his brothers, who do have sons, are about as qualified to rule as a sheep in a crown. So what does he do? He borrows his friend's kid, aka young Salah al-Din, claims him as his own, and uses him as political insurance to secure his path to the throne. If his brothers ever found out the truth, the fallout wouldn't just be awkward family dinner. It would be open civil war, and possibly a few decapitations for dessert. Now here's a fun twist. Historically, it was usually noble or royal families sending their children out to be fostered by nomadic tribes, not the other way around. The idea was that the nomads would toughen them up, teach them survival skills, and keep them connected to their warrior heritage. In the show, the nomadic family is giving their child to be raised by a prince. It's like flipping the script. Question 11. Are the Boru an actual Turkic tribe? Boru means wolf in mini Turkic language, and not just in a cute little forest creature way, but in the sacred warrior totem way. Modern Turkish uses Kirk for wolf, but Boru still carries the older meaning in the cultural and historical sense. So when the Boru tribe shows up in the series and you hear wolf howls in the background, yeah, that's not random sound design. It's the writers leaning hard into the wolf pack hunter aesthetic. Now, here's the truth bomb. While wolves are absolutely central to Turkic mythology, the Boru tribe, as it appears in the show, is likely a fictionalized composite. Historically, the Oghuz Turks, the larger ethnic group they're meant to represent, are very real. They were Central Asian nomads with a warrior culture, unmatched horsemanship, and a long-standing wolf obsession. The wolf in Turkic lore symbolized strength, loyalty, and courage, and it appears all over their pre-Islamic and post-Islamic folklore. Think of it as their version of a medieval national mascot, only less fluffy and more likely to bite your face off. As for the Oghuz themselves, they didn't just ride into Anatolia for a sightseeing trip. They came in waves, conquered, and helped form empires like the Seljuks. Later, many Oghuz clans became king allies of Nur al-Din and his successors, which is why the show ties the Boru so closely to Salah al-Din's story. Question 12. Is the story Ismet Hatun telling about the Wolf Mother a legend? Yes, and not just any legend, but one of the oldest and most famous origin myths in Turkic history. The story Ismet Hatun tells comes straight from the pre-Islamic Turkic mythology back when Turkic peoples followed Tengriism, the steppe's native sky god religion. The she-wolf in question is Asena, the ultimate wolf mom. The short version goes like this. The Turkic people are almost completely wiped out in some catastrophic war. Only one young boy survives, badly injured. Asena, a divine wolf goddess slash shapeshifter, finds him, nurses him back to health, and raises him into adulthood. Then, because this is a mythology and the steppe was never short on weird plot twists, she transforms into a beautiful woman. The boy and the wolf woman unite, and she gives birth to 10 half-wolf, half-human sons. You don't have to think too hard about it. One of those sons becomes the founder of the Ashina clan, which in turn establishes the Göktürk Khanate, the first great Turkic empire in history. The wolf becomes a sacred symbol for Turkic people, representing resilience, strength, and the ability to survive against impossible odds, which is why you still see wolf imagery in Turkic culture today. So yes, Ismet's story is a real legend, with centuries of cultural weight behind it. Question 13. Is Ismet Hatun a real historical person? Yes, Ismet Hatun was very real, though the historical version is a lot hazier than the made-for-TV one. She was from an Oghuz Turkic tribe. The show calls them Boru, wolf symbolism and all, and there's evidence she did eventually marry Nur al-Din, but the records are sketchy, so if you're looking for a medieval Instagram feed of her life, you're out of luck. Historically, her marriage to Nur al-Din would have been a smart political move. Tribal alliances were the medieval Muslim world's version of NATO treaties, only with more horses and fewer press conferences. By marrying into the Boru Oghuz, Nur al-Din could cement ties with fierce, battle-ready nomads, giving him more muscle for his big project, uniting Muslims in the Levant to face the Crusaders. Now here's where reality and TV start giving each other side eyes. There's some evidence Ismet may have stayed with her tribe after the marriage, which probably means she was too young for the marriage to be consummated right away. This was common in political matches of the time. The show dodges this by making her the Bey, or chief of her tribe. Is there historical evidence she actually led her tribe? No. Is it impossible? Also no. Among nomadic and semi-nomadic Turkic people, women could and did lead. Nomadic Turkic society was far more egalitarian than most settled societies of the era. Leadership wasn't automatically a men-only club, and respect was based more on wisdom, ability, and survival skills than on gender. Chinese chroniclers actually mocked the Turks for this, writing about their strange habit of letting women lead men into battle. But from a practical standpoint, if half of your warriors are away raiding or hunting, who's left to defend the camp? The women are, of course, and they weren't just going to sit around hoping for the best. They were trained to fight, ride, and shoot as well as any man. So while TV Ismet Hatun might be more warrior chief than her historical counterpart, the idea of a Turkic woman leading in war wasn't fantasy. It was simply good sense, because on the steppe, not teaching your women to fight would have been about as smart as not learning how to ride a horse. Question 14. Is Karategan a real historical person? Yes, Karategan Bey was indeed a real figure tied to the Zingid court. Historically, he wasn't just hanging around the palace looking dramatic. He held military and administrative roles and fought in several campaigns against the Crusaders. Among the Oghuz Turks, he gained a reputation as a skilled and heroic warrior, the kind of guy bards would sing about. Though, frustrating for us, history left us only fragments of his story. Now here's where the TV writers break out the creative spice rack. There's no historical record of him being Ismet Hatun's brother. That's pure dramatic seasoning to give the Boru tribe's characters a tighter, soapier family dynamic. In reality, his fame came from his own battlefield achievement, not from being a supporting character in his sister's subplot. So yes, Karategan was real. The sibling connection, that's fiction. But let's be honest, giving him a warrior princess sister in the show just makes for better TV. And medieval politics could always use a little extra telenovela energy. Question 15. Why are the Crusaders portrayed so badly in this TV series? This question is easy. For the same reason Muslims are almost always portrayed as the mustache-twirling villains in Western historical dramas. The storyteller controls the story. Change the storyteller, and suddenly the noble hero is someone else, and the villain starts looking suspiciously like the guy your history teacher said was a saint. Now let's remember who we're talking about here. By the time of the Second Crusade, a big chunk of Crusader forces weren't exactly pious knights on a divine mission. They were mercenaries, adventurers, and opportunists looking for loot, land, and the occasional war trophy. The Frankish Crusaders were invaders to the people of the Levant, Muslim, Jewish, and even Eastern Christian alike, and they weren't exactly greeted with fresh bread and flowers. And the Knights Templar? Forget the romanticized holy warrior PR bullshit. In 12th century West Asia, they had a reputation as aggressive, trigger-happy zealots who answered to no one but themselves. Their tactics were brutal, massacring not only Muslim combatants but also civilians, including Jews and local Christians who happened to be on the wrong side of their liberation. Cooperation with other Crusader leaders? Minimal. Looting and amassing wealth? Absolutely. If HBO made a series about them, it'd be called Game of Loans, because the Templars eventually turned into one of the most powerful banking institutions in Europe, funded largely by exploiting the very lands they claimed to be freeing. Sound familiar? So why does the show make them look bad? Because from the Muslim perspective, and the perspective of plenty of Jews and Eastern Christians at the time, they were bad. And while Western drama loves to hand the Crusaders the shining armor of moral high ground, this series simply flips the cameras around and shows the other side. And honestly shows more truth, if you ask me. 16. Who was Omar Mela? Omar Mela, total fiction. You won't find him in the history books, but the type of character he is absolutely existed. He's the classic wise old mystic archetype based on real dervish sages who were a big deal in the medieval Islamic world. Dervishes weren't just wandering poets with nice beards. They were often members of the Sufi order who mixed deep spirituality with real political influence. Think of them as part monk, part life coach, part community organizer, and sometimes part royal advisor. They wrote mystical poetry, taught religion and secular subjects, settled disputes, and were known to walk straight into the courts of sultans and tell them they were being idiots and somehow not get executed for it. They were also the medieval world's unofficial social workers, running schools, caring for the poor and sick, and stepping in as mediators during conflicts. And yes, during the Crusades, dervishes were known to rally the public to resist foreign invasion, using both fiery speeches and a lot of very quotable wisdom. So while Omar Mela himself is fictional, the show's version of him is basically a Sufi greatest hits compilation. Part spiritual guide, part political whisperer, and part conscience of the main characters. In other words, he's doing exactly what a historical dervish advisor would have done. Question 17. Were Gabrielle and Gregor real historical people? Short answer, no. These two are entirely fictional. The writer's way of giving us consistent crusader antagonists without forcing the audience to memorize an endless parade of historical Hughs, Rays, and Joffreys. That said, they do represent realistic archetypes. Gabrielle is your textbook ruthless Knight Templar, armored to the teeth, deeply religious, and absolutely convinced God is his personal war general. Gregor, his charmingly unhinged brother, is the opposite. A barbaric mercenary bounty hunter who isn't in it for God, glory, or country, just the pure joy of smashing skulls and settling personal vendettas. Gabrielle has at least a flimsy warrior's code. Gregor's only code is kill now, maybe ask questions later. And while we're on fictional nobles, let's talk about Princess Victoria. Baldwin III was real. He ruled the Kingdom of Jerusalem from 1143 to 1163, but he definitely didn't have a sister named Victoria. Historically, he had two known sisters, Sibylla and Matilda. Could there have been another sister lost to history? Possibly. In the medieval record, royal women often only got mentioned if they married someone important, ascended the throne, gave birth to a politically relevant son, or cloistered themselves in a convent. So Victoria might be a stand-in for an undocumented sister, or just a fully made-up character designed to add extra palace intrigue and questionable French pronunciation to the plot. So no, Gabrielle, Gregor, and Victoria probably never walked the earth, but their types absolutely did. And if you drop the real versions into the show, they'd probably fit right in. Though Gregor might complain there aren't enough people to kill in every episode. Question 18. Where is Richard the Lionheart? Will he be showing up? Right now, nowhere, because it's still too early in Salah al-Din's story for Richard to ride onto the scene swinging his sword and his PR team. Richard I of England, better known as Richard the Lionheart, belongs to the Third Crusade, which took place between 1189 through 1192. While the series is still covering the events that lead up to that, historically, Salah al-Din and Richard won't face off until decades after the Second Crusade. That said, come on, you can't make a Salah al-Din series and not bring in Richard at some point. That would be like making a Batman movie and never showing the Joker. My guess, he'll make his grand entrance later, probably with dramatic slow motion shots, a thundering soundtrack, and enough chainmail to make your neck hurt just looking at him. And if the writers have any sense of historical drama, they'd also give us his mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, who frankly deserves her own series. She was one of the most powerful and fascinating women of the Middle Ages, a political mastermind, and the kind of person who could negotiate with kings in the morning and host a courtly love poetry competition in the afternoon. She's also one of my favorite female historical personalities. Not including her would be, well, medieval TV malpractice, at least in my opinion. So for now, patience. Richard will come charging in eventually, and when he does, expect it to be loud, shiny, and extremely Frankish. And that, my friends, wraps up our little stroll through the blood-soaked, politically messy, historically questionable garden of Salah al-Din Eyyubi, Conqueror of Jerusalem, episodes 1 through 7. We've separated fact from fiction, untangled medieval family drama that could rival any Netflix soap, and called out more historical nonsense than a drunk night at a jousting tournament. Remember, history is written by the winners, but historical dramas are written by people who want ratings. Big difference. So if you enjoyed me ruining your favorite characters with actual facts, or just like the sound of my voice telling you that Gregor isn't real, then do the noble thing. Like, share, and subscribe. It's the modern day equivalent of sending tribute to your sultan. Except I take payment in clicks, not camels. Thanks for listening!